Hey there viewers, welcome back to another episode of Ray of All Trades. The last item I plan on working on today, because it's getting late, is going to be a Honda CRF50. Cute little bike. I think it's a 2019 he told me. Said it doesn't start. Check this thing out. There's a tube in the back end. The other side here, the bead has jumped off the rim. So guaranteed we're going to put a tube in it. Well, I shouldn't say guaranteed. I can pull it out, see if it holds air, and perhaps we might put it back in. But the gut feeling was that it needed a tube. How about that? It's a Honda bike. Handbrake works pretty good. The engine start and stop switch seems to function like it's supposed to. Gear selector works like it's supposed to. I mean, it's like a brand new bike. It's just, it's sat, so the tire went flat. They tried to move it and it jumped off the rim, and very likely he did try to start it. He said that it will not start, so it's a pretty good chance that the carburetor's just gummed up. Compression is really good on this thing, so I'm tempted really just to pull that carburetor and see what's gummed up inside there. I know it's been sitting. I see the discoloration at the bottom on the fuel bowl. I can pull the drain screw, see if anything comes out. But there is definitely a discoloration on the outside of the carburetor. Let's see. Well, we had some in it. Whoa. I wish you guys could smell that. Oh boy, that's bad. Yeah, that ethanol fuel, even on a brand new bike like this, see, that ethanol fuel, it just tears those up. So anyway, let's pull that carburetor off, take a look and see what we got. I got a really good feeling that a ultrasonic cleaner may end up cleaning this thing up just right. And while it's working on that, I'll go ahead and pull that tube out and inflate it with some air and see if it actually holds. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do, make sure that the fuel is in the off position on the fuel shutoff. So Phillips head screw on the bottom for the clamp tied to the air box. Just loosen that up. That should... No, it's not going to pull out the way because there's a 10mm bolt right there. We are going to loosen up that 10mm bolt. Looks like it's got a ground wire attached to it. And make sure that ground wire goes back or else we will have problems. Let's pull the air box back. I know it's the air filter, but they refer to it as the air box when it has all that in it. There is a fuel line right here. Pull that clamp back. You may have some residual fuel in here. I got the clamp off of it. I'm trying to twist the hose to just break the seal. So just unscrew this and it should lift straight out if there's enough room. No, there's not. Anyway, we're going to end up pulling it anyway. So there's two 8mm bolts right here that go through the air intake, through a gasket, and into the carburetor. This is the preferred one to take off. These bolts here, not down here. This has O-rings on each side. Some of them have O-rings and some of them have gasket. And if you tear that gasket, you're going to be ordering parts. So I always try to prefer to take it out of here if at all possible. And if you break a bolt, it's easier to deal with a carburetor in your hand than it is to deal with tapping a block. So there was that intake. So there's an O-ring on one side, no O-ring on the other side, but when you look at the carburetor, you'll see that there's an O-ring on this side. And on this one, we are going to be buying parts. Oh shoot. I'll show you guys here in just a second what I'm looking at. There is a breather hose on this side. The O-ring for that carburetor was torn. It was pulled out once before and put back, and so it's got a massive intake leak. We have to replace that. Doesn't sound like we were the first ones in here. Choke lever works like it's supposed to. Looking down inside the jets, and there's a whole lot of discoloration. Looking at the body of the carburetor, that's that discoloration I was talking to you guys about. And that's kind of why I was eager to jump straight into that carburetor. You start seeing discoloration like that, yeah, you kind of already know that it's coming. So yep, see, kind of what we expected, right guys? The jet's a little discolored. I think we might be able to put this in the ultrasonic and bring it around. We're gonna try anyway. What do we have to lose, right? I am gonna have to look for an O-ring, and I'm also gonna have to see if I can get that rear tube out of there. All right, let's see. We're gonna put the bowl down in there. Let's pull this hose off. I'm gonna set it up higher because that's the one that goes further up the breather. I'll go ahead and pull out this O-ring, and if it holds its shape somewhat, should be able to match up while I'm letting this carburetor cook. Let's pull out the float and the needle. The needle fell down in there. The float, it's really not going to do much in a ultrasonic. It's just going to float around. Let's see if I can get this gasket out without damaging it. Whenever I can, I pull the gasket out. If it doesn't need to cook, accidents can happen when they're hot like that. See if we can get the needle out. Excuse me, the main jet. I can see through it, but it's a really small hole. I know it's a 50 cc, but it looks even smaller than it should be. No reason to really pull out the emulsion tube. It's really just going to clean it while it's in there. The emulsion tube is down at the bottom of that. Goes the one that goes up into the body of the carburetor. Let's go to those parts of bath and let them cook for a little bit. I'm going to put hot water and a couple capfuls of Purple Power. Purple Power. This will discolor aluminum, but honestly on this one it's already discolored. It's a great cleaner though. I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to fill up all the way up to the line here with hot water. I'm going to let it go for about 30 minutes on heat and ultrasonic, and we'll come back and try to put it back together if we got all the parts. So while that's cooking, and hopefully it's not too loud for you guys, get this tube pulled out of here. So when I got it, the bead was already off of here. Otherwise, you would treat it just like a bicycle. This thing still has air in it. I wouldn't have expected that if it was torn like I was on the impression of. We're gonna give this thing a go. It's been sitting this long and has never needed air. I can understand why the rim would have come off. Not used to working on something this new, so I'm going to have to be really careful about scratching up the chrome. I would have normally stuck a pair of vice grips on here, hold that in place while I work my way around, but the bike is extremely new. I'm working it on by hand, but I'm going to quickly reach a point when I have to use some tire spoons. And that point is now. 36 psi. Get it set and see if it holds. Oddly enough, the problem that I have with bikes this small is after I get them fixed, I've got no way to test them. I'm too fat for them. So I've got a nitrile O-ring assortment, Harbor Freight. And if I had to guess, I would say that this is probably going to be the closest fit that I can find. Actually, that O-ring there is a really close match. If it's not that one, it might actually be that one. We have to wait till the carburetor comes out. I really doubt that it's going to be identical to this other. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's possible it's an exact match. This one looks a little bit small. This one looks a little bit big. Let's open up the SAE assortment and see if it has anything close. Ah, that's a really close fit to this O-ring. And that happens to be an SAE version. 11/16 by 7/8 by 3/32. It's an A115. Anyway, it's possible that's right, but I want to get the carburetor back out just to make sure that it's got a good fit. I shouldn't be going only off the intake manifold block. So let's see how that carburetor turned out. That's pretty hot. Looking much better. Oh yeah, much better. Much better. I'm going to set you guys in the stand and get the compressed air and blow out all those passages. Safety glasses are a must. So on that bowl, you have the screw that you can open and lets all the fuel inside the bowl out this passage from in here. You've also got the overflow. If the fuel level gets too high, it'll actually run down this tube and out that same exact hole. That's what those parts are. I'm just going to push air through every one of the jets I can find. Emulsion tube. I think that's the idle jet. This is the fuel inlet. The needle and seat fit in. Idle jet. I think it's a bypass jet. It's for different stages of idle. Fuel inlet. I said it discolors it just get you guys back in the shot. It discolors it just a little bit. I don't know that it's necessary. I just wanted to bring it up just in case you're working on an heirloom piece of aluminum or something like that and try to use a chemical along those lines. But it does a really good job cleaning out old gasoline, grease, things like that. So our main jet, that water is really hot, by the way. If you change exhaust on a motorcycle and they tell you to rejet it, this is what they're telling you to change. And all it is a difference, and there's no way you'll see this, but I'm going to try anyway. There's a little bitty pinhole in that, and that's what the amount of fuel that gets pulled up to mix with the air. So they just give you a larger opening jet to match less exhaust pressure. Let's go ahead and put that jet back in while we're thinking of it. Doesn't take a whole lot of tension. It's brass going into aluminum. Just keep that in mind. It's weak. When you're looking at these needles, concentrate your efforts. Let's see, can I focus? Concentrate your efforts on that tip right there. If it's got a ring going around it, there's a pretty good chance that fuel is probably going to get past it. It's a rubber. I've seen some that were actually carbon, but most of these are a rubber tip, and they drop into a metal seat, and that's what seals off your gasoline flow. So the float raises this up. This goes up against a hole inside the carburetor and stops the fuel from coming into the carburetor and making its way into that bowl. So that's what's regulating the amount of fuel in that float bowl. Just put the needle inside the float. Put the arm through the float. I'm going to drop it down in here, keeping it at a forward angle like that so it can drop down inside that hole. And then wiggle it in place till that drops in. I'm going to put that screw back on to hold it. Panhead style screw. Actually, I think it's called a cone head style screw. But it's a mixture of both, a pan head round on top and a cone head round, you know, angled on the bottom. So I don't know what you would call it. Combination? Pan cone? Pine cone? I don't know. Drop it in the comments. Tell me what kind of screw that is. When this floats in the down position, fuel is allowed to travel through here. When the float bowl fills up and the fuel allows this to close, it pinches off or closes off the jet, allowing this fuel to enter. So I just use air while this is all apart, so I can make any adjustments necessary if I have to. I'm gonna blow air through it in this position, see if it makes sure that air does go through, and then flip it over and let gravity close it and make sure that air doesn't go through. Yep, works like it's supposed to. If this gasket leaks, fuel will actually just come out of that seam in the carburetor. Drops on there just like that. This is one of those type of gaskets. If it gets hit with a carb cleaner, the gasket will swell. It'll expand. You can try to bring it back around by sticking it in a cup of water, a cup of ice water. But I haven't always had the best of luck bringing them around that way. So seat this back on. I'm going to drop these two screws in. We found an O-ring that we think fits in the SAE kit. Let's try it on the carburetor and see what it looks like. It's actually a pretty close fit. It might be a little on the thick side. Well, that's the one we were talking about earlier. Throttle lever, it actually controls the amount of air coming through. Inside here, it's got a pin sticking in on this side pretty up high, and it has another pin way down here, down low. If you look at this, the way this is constructed, one side has a groove all the way up, the other side has a groove that's really down low. So you just match those two up, and once they're in place, just get it mostly tight, not all the way, because you're going to want the ability to turn it before it tightens up the rest of the way. Alright, let's just pull all this stuff out of the way so I can see and you guys can see. Alright. We know that this is a flat metal surface here, so we know that the O-ring side of this manifold block spacer faces it, and then this has a flat side of that spacer, and that is the side that the O-ring that we found goes into the carburetor on. And actually I like to be able to piece that together out here. As it's not the perfect O-ring. I have to put it there so that I can place it. I'm just holding tension on it, mostly to keep that O-ring in place. Okay. Grab the 8mm wrench. Try to tighten them evenly. Well, I can tell you that it drew up really nice and tight, like it's supposed to. Let's go ahead and put the fuel line back on. That breather hose goes on that other side. It's just a hose that goes up to the back of the body here and stops. And finally we have this drain hose. And whenever you open up this screw to let the fuel drain out, it just runs down this hose. Snap those two together. One thing I forgot to check, and it's got me before. Let's see what kind of fuel, if any, is inside this tank. I'm going to accomplish a couple things here. Number one, we're going to make sure that if there is any fuel in there, we can see what it looks like. Number two, we're going to check the shutoff valve. I just turned it on and I've got nothing coming out. Put it on reserve, which is inside the tank. You've got two spots that the fuel can come out of the tank and into a hole. The reserve opens up a hole down low. The main, or the on, opens up a hole up high on it. So the idea is it'll run down to the point where it hits the on hole. You still have the remaining fuel from there down to the reserve hole that'll let it out. So if you're running down, obviously you want to check everything, put it down on reserve. That's going to get the absolute bottom of the tank. Let's go ahead and turn this to the off position. I'm not seeing any fuel at all come out, so that was bone dry. Good for me, I don't have to get rid of any bad gasoline. This time of year, that seems like that's all you have, is everybody's got bad gasoline, and you have to wait for the recycle days. Well, the first thing I found is that my shutoff valve doesn't work. It's slowed down, but it definitely isn't working. Yep, that shutoff valve doesn't work. Well, if nothing else, I got the whatever fuel residual was left in there out. Let's go ahead and get this back on. Knowing that it doesn't shut off tells me a lot. So if somebody thought that they were shutting off the fuel for the season, there's a pretty good chance that it wouldn't have shut off. So my air box goes next. There's a ground wire. You guys see it? There's a ground wire right there. It goes in between that plastic air box, or actually it's metal on the air box. Is that plastic or metal? Feels like plastic. All right. Anyway, put the metal ground strap on the back side. That's how it was. I mean, ideally the bolt's going to conduct anyway, but we'll line up those holes, feed that 10mm bolt up in there. I'll have to show you when I'm done because my fingers are just in the way. I'll tighten it up, but anyway, there's that bolt goes through the plastic housing of the air box. The ground wire is behind that, and then it's all threading into this metal plate back here on the back side. Alright, air box is on. Still got to tighten it up on the carburetor. I heard y'all. I heard you. Y'all were telling me. Yeah. I'm guessing that's choke, and then when it's running you put it down here. Okay, let's get that locked down. Looks like engine stop is in the up position, so down is run. Fuel is already on. What I don't know where neutral is. I think that's neutral. Let's see. So choke is, or fuel is on. Choke is in this up position right now. Hopefully that's right. There's a key switch. Alright, I might have already flooded it. It didn't occur to me it was a key switch. Let's go ahead and open up the choke just to see. Something I didn't do is tighten up that throttle cable on the top, but honestly I don't think that's my problem here. Looks like the adjustment screws for the carburetor are on this side, and I'm gonna have to play with them to see which one's which. Definitely a wobble in that back tire. Well, shut it off by that switch there. Shut off the key switch. Yeah, that tube's already gone flat again after I filled it up. So we're going to go ahead and get a T ordered for this thing. And we got it back in running condition. So let's get to this tube. With motorcycles, with forks, and with rear wheels, the torque is specific here. And I'm going to use my caliper to determine how far in that nut was. I just set it and locked it. These keepers are already adjusted for the distance that they're supposed to be at, but there's marks on here as well, and I'm going to go ahead and mark those just to make sure I put it back in the same distance. Excuse me, 14 millimeter wrench on this side, and a 19 3/4 on this side. Pull that off. Pull off the keeper on this side. Set it to the side. Pull off this keeper. And before I pull this axle all the way out, I'm going to disconnect the brake, push forward, and release the chain off of here as well. So let's get this brake arm off first. Okay. Pull it out. Always replace those. Never reuse cotter pins unless you absolutely have to. And even if you have to, I can only do it for a temporary time. Alright, let's pull this chain off. Once the chain's off, go ahead and pull it out. Hold it. Let's pull the brake assembly out. If anybody's ever seen the inside of a brake assembly, that's what it looks like. Here's your shoes, spring, step on the brake, it turns this. Turns this, expands the brakes out. Put the chain back on. This one has sealed bearings. This thing has sealed bearings, which is why I didn't need to add grease on this. We are going to line this mark and this mark up. Make sure we have the same chain tension that we had before. And I'm not going to tighten it up anymore than this is set for. Little 3/8 inch impact. Okay, that one side is good. This side is good. There we go. Those are locked down. We need a cotter pin that fits this for the brake. I need more space in my garage. Brake still works. Remove my calipers before I crush them. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. We worked on a lot of equipment. I'm probably going to break it up into multiple videos. But hey, if you liked it, like what you saw, or just enjoyed watching me work, give me a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Tells me what kind of content you guys like to see. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. Peace.